look like I haven't had a lot of sleep, and I actually haven't. But I'm gonna have to. When you get old, you get dark circles under your eyes. Oh,
All
that's
right, so
another
we're
thing that
live.
could be. All right.
Yeah. All right, guys. Welcome back to Critical African Thinkers. As you know, this is a place where we examine everything under the microscope of logic to ascertain what is most factual and logically consistent. We haven't had a stream in a long while, so we're getting back to doing what we used to do, what we love to do, right? Just analyzing issues and try to understand what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. So, going forward on Thursday, Stanley and I are going to be hosting this show where we just talk about interesting topics, current affairs, politics, social issues, and any other topics that the audience might want to recommend us to have a conversation on. So today we're going to be talking about identity politics, and can the question is, can Democrats teach identity politics? And this was a fallout from a conversation that Thomas Chatterton Williams had with the Bulwark. It was the same question: can Democrats ditch identity politics? So for me, one of the things that has been a very obvious feature of democratic politics, or the politics of Democrats, has been identity politics. Um, and it seemed to have had an effect in the outcome of the last elections, right? So Democrats are obviously in a much weaker position right now, and many people have attributed the failures of the Democratic Party to identity politics. So we're just going to look through that. We're going to look at what is identity politics. Do we think that it plays any role in the outcome of the election? And is it something, can the Democrats, can they rebrand themselves to do away with identity politics? Or is identity politics itself, is it unique to the Democratic Party? Does the right do that? Do the conservatives or Republicans do that? And what shape or form does that take on the right? So, with Stanley, we're just going to have a free flowing conversation. So, Stanley, first of all, when you hear the word identity politics, what comes to mind?
Well, basically, it is kind of something. I would say it started maybe right around uh, right around 2008. But I'm going to argue, if you actually, I'm going to say the word, the term was coined right around the time Obama came in, and then it got tied to wokeness and all that stuff. Uh, so the term, as something that, say, a McWhorter or a Glenn Lowry, kind of became concerned. If you remember, McWhorter wrote a book. He basically, was it wokeness? I mean, wokeness and identity politics are basically, in my mind, kind of tied together, joined together at the hip. So I'd say right around um, Obama. And if you'll remember, there's an article that McWhorter wrote, and I can't remember if it was in the Atlantic or City Journal, City Journal, but he basically declared that America was post-racial shortly after Obama got elected. And I actually went back and read the article because I couldn't believe that he would think that. But he declared it and was proven almost disastrously wrong. Um, and the reason I say disastrously is, who but Trump started that whole birther thing? The birth certificate of Obama, he wasn't born here. What is that but identity politics? You're not an American, your father's Kenyan, that's literally identity politics. People started questioning Obama's Americanness. So nationality is an identity. So anyway, I'm over talking it, but I'd say it came, kind of a fashion and, just part of the lexicon around the time Obama was elected.
Yeah, I think so too. But for me, I think one of the features that I saw it took was, you know, making certain identities front and center for the Democratic Party. So it wasn't just Americanness, right? You can say Americanness is an identity. There are various layers of identity. So it was the identity, okay, of Black people, the Black issues. There was the identity of women, women's issues. Was the identity of gay people, gay issues. The identity of trans people. Was the identity of Latino people, and
Hispanics,
so
Asians.
Hispanics, and so on and so forth. So it seemed as if what the Democrats were doing with, they were taking people and putting them into these chunks, these blocks, right? Now it's more like a set. Of course, people would intersect. There are people that will fall into multiple categories, right? But it just seemed like the Democrats were essentializing certain features, especially more akin to superficial features of skin tone and gender identity and so on and so forth. So probably that's why there was such a backlash to it, right? Where people, maybe those on the right or the broader American society, saw that and was like, why is it necessary? If you're talking about women's issues, you're talking about Black issues, the things that you are talking, the problems you're saying affect these communities is not unique to these communities. For example, let's say poverty, for example. Poverty is not unique to the African American community, right? And some white people might take it as as a slight to say, well, why is this being framed as though this only affects the African American community? And why is it being framed as though it is my fault, right? Why is it being framed as though it's white people's fault? So it seemed like every identity was represented except the white identity. Probably that's
Oh, I
where
thoroughly
the
disagree with
whole
that.
back. Okay, so give me a reason why you think
Well,
that that was
let me
not the case.
start with this. And you go back to and read a book like Racecraft by the Field Sisters. Uh, the reason white people might feel left out, two reasons, but the modern reason and the historical reason, everything is assumed to be white. Okay, everything revolves around, say, a European beauty standard, the the Republican with a capital R form of government. And, in the spaces I'm in these days, I don't know how many people will go that, America is a white country. You've certainly heard that before. White is assumed. That's why it doesn't get emphasized. Okay, we assume, let's just take a ridiculous example. We assume that all humans are air breathers. Who thinks about air? We breathe it. We all breathe it. No one goes and talks about air. Now, I do realize there's there's environmentalists and stuff like that, but you never hear people just kind of like wondering, why do we breathe more oxygen than we do nitrogen? No one ever thinks about it, but it's there. Okay, and then where I want to go with this is identity politics is literally interwoven into the fabric of America forever. Okay, and if it's not racial identity, it's class. There are so many forms of like identity. And if you ever hear a non, for instance, talk about caste, dude, there are literally, um, think of something that makes you unique. Um, it's an identity. Intersectionality, if you remember that term, where you're a woman, you're Black, you're maybe middle class, that intersectionality, which pre-existed the term identity politics, it's literally been there forever. Okay, if you go back, think about 1661, 1662, Maryland and Virginia, the first Black codes, where they talked about partus, can't remember the whole Latin term, but where they determined that, oh, hey, if your mother was a slave, you inherit slavery as an identity. It's literally been there before America was ever formed. And my belief, and I'm not even being, my usual sarcastic self, the reason Americans, your rank and file American bought that whole identity politics thing is because they're poorly educated about American history. Okay, slave as an identifier to African descended people pre-existed America. That was literally an identity that was put into law. We have always had identity and politics. Go back and think about, when George Washington was president, the Constitution was literally written because they wanted to avoid parties. Okay, and the only president in American history that transcended party politics was George Washington. Immediately, the second president, John Adams, Federalist. Third president, Thomas Jefferson, Jeffersonian Republican. We have always had identity in our politics. Obviously, no one put two and two together, or someone like maybe, and Christopher Rufo didn't come up, but you remember the whole Christopher Rufo thing. I'm going to take a term CRT and I'm going to just think everything I don't like, I'm going to call it CRT. I'm going to assign it an identity. Identity politics has never not existed in America. And I argue all the way back to 1607. You're an Indian. I'm a European. It has always existed. So if you want to just think it's something that the Democrats did, here in the past 20 years, you would just be ahistorical and not really understand what identity is, what identity politics is. I argue you don't even know what politics is.
But some people might argue that the identity politics in the founding of America was precisely the problem that successive generations try to get away from.
I disagree.
Okay, so let me try and flesh out my thoughts, right? If identity politics, the country was founded on the principle of the competing identities and some identities having primacy over the others, right? The European being, or the white American being at the top, and the enslaved African being at the bottom, right? And enshrined in the US Constitution is this idea that all men are created equal, and striving to achieve that, right? Which led to the emancipation of slaves and so on and so forth, with the civil rights and all that. Wasn't that in keeping with trying to do away with identity and try to create a Pan-American identity where everyone is just American instead of an hyphenated American?
Not even close. That is the Dunning School or something like that. That's something that was taught maybe in first grade just to make American history easy to digest for a 7 or 8-year-old. Not even close. Identity. If you go back to the Constitutional Convention, where they were talking about slavery. There were Northerners and Southerners. There were rich people. There were poor people. Identity politics is so complicated. If you took, the weave and the weft of a cloth, if you put, a piece of cloth on the table and you look at it close, you're going to notice the interweaving threads. Okay. It was never like a lot of the Constitution was rhetoric. Okay, you go back and you read the Federalist Papers. They, the framers of the Constitution, especially the Federalists, were trying to get rank and file American buy-in. Okay, a lot of that, we're working towards freedom. It is literally politics.
Yeah,
I don't
know
know.
I know it's politics, but
Okay, I don't buy
the
that.
part I'm talking about is the essentializing of competing identities, right? Why
And
that
what I'm saying
isn't
is
something to
that
get away from. Don't you think it's
America's
something to get away from?
Oh, it's definitely something we should. It's also something I don't think is possible. You know, you can have a lofty goal, you can try and reach the mountaintop, but it's like the myth of Sisyphus. You know, you keep rolling that rock uphill and it will roll back down, and then you try again. You know, humans will never be perfect. Um, Race essentialism is There are people on the far right, like MAGA people. And again, I deal with these people almost every day. Okay, they will tell you that racist behaviors are ingrained in human beings, like it's almost genetic. There are people that will argue. So we may be trying to achieve something, and I'm not saying we shouldn't try. Maybe one day we'll get close. My argument is that we will probably never get there. It's just how, humans are built. You know, you go for a goal, but you never quite get there. That's the human condition. I'm also going to argue that people who want to do that pie in the sky, the Constitution was a freedom document. I thoroughly reject that premise. All you got to do is literally read the Constitution, literally read Madison's notes, literally read the Federalist Papers. They didn't mention slavery in the Constitution because basically it would be such a dichotomy to talk about all men created equal than say in the Constitution that, oh, if you're a slave, you're not. Okay, these people knew what they were doing, they knew what they were writing. There's a reason the word slave does not show up. Go and read Madison's notes, go and read the Federalist Papers, go and read some history outside of a high school textbook.
Could it be that they knew that a time would come where slavery would be abolished, and it was worth it wasn't worth soiling the Constitution at that time with something as dastardly as slavery?
I'm not going to say there weren't some people who thought that. Southerners didn't. Go back and look. Go back and
Yeah, but
read.
no,
Go
we're
back
talking
and read the
specifically.
hold on one sec. Go
Tell
back
me.
and read. Go back and read Madison's notes, where Georgia and South Carolina said, if we even get a whiff of you thinking slavery is going to end, we will walk out of this constitutional convention right now. That was literally Georgia and South Carolina's position. And I'm not exaggerating.
Okay. So let's go back to Democrats. In your opinion, do you think that the way the Democrats um, played, if there's any such thing as playing identity politics, do you think that the way they played identity politics, which is as American as you have said so, do you think it was the right way to go about it? Or was there something they could have done differently?
No, it's as simple as that.
So,
And the reason why is the Republican Party, especially MAGA within the Republican Party, they're way more homogenous racially, ideologically. They're more, there's more homogeneity on the right than there is the left. Okay, the left is, basically struggling sometimes to cobble together what's like herding cats, if you ever heard that term. Okay, within the Democratic Party, if you go and you ever listen to progressives, they literally think, I don't know if you ever listen to Aramiose Frimpong anymore, but it's almost shocking where you will hear former Bernie voters who basically you've heard about many Bernie voters voting for MAGA. rather than Democrats. If you ever hear progressives who are like hardcore progressives talk about the Democrats, they talk about them worse than they do Trump in MAGA. MAGA and the left progressives have a lot in common, populism being one of them. So I think it's harder to get a unified Democrat Party than there is getting a Republican Party. So I don't think you can be a Democrat and not be aware that you have to build more coalitions on the left in the
So,
Democratic Party. So
so
I mean, there is identity politics. It's almost fundamental to the Democratic Party, less so in the Republican Party.
So when you go back to the point of this identity politics, I want to refer to okay, homogeneity. This homogeneity thing that you just mentioned, that the MAGA Republicans are more homogeneous ideologically and so on and so forth. I think Thomas mentioned this in that interview at the Bulwark, where he said that the reason why the Republicans have been so effective is because they have a single message, right? And their message
Right.
is very simple, and it doesn't cater to any group. It's you like it or you don't like it, right? You come in or you don't, right? That's why you see Black MAGA. That's why you see Black people are MAGA. You see Hispanic people are MAGA, right? It just it's unlike the Democrats who are trying to cater to everyone. So they have a different message for every group, and
I
it
disagree with
becomes
that.
well, that's what it seems. It becomes a mishmash where you have so many, you are trying to appeal to
Well,
this.
let's
The
reframe
Republicans
what
are
you just
saying,
said.
yeah, let me finish.
We
The
we need
Republicans
to
are saying,
let's I don't think
this
what you're
is,
saying is wrong. I think you need to
mm,
kind of look at it a different way. It's not that
mm,
there's a message for the blacks, it's not that there's a message for the Hispanics. Um, it would seem like that outside looking in, but I think that someone said the other day, think about American culture, because I've been thinking a lot about it in, for other reasons. But the Democrats, America in general, but the Democrats in particular, are not a melting pot. It's a mosaic. Okay. It's like a puzzle. Okay. So there are some unifying messages like women's rights. There are some commonalities as far as uh, um, choice, that sort of thing. There are some messages, voting rights, that sort of thing, that everyone in the Democratic Party will agree with. However, it's like herding cats. Okay. If you go and you talk about immigration, for instance, Democrats will be all over the place on the immigration issue. Um, I don't know that I don't know that I agree with the framing that Biden, for instance, will go to the black people, and then he'll go to the brown people, and he's not saying anything different. I mean, when he talked about appointing a black woman Supreme Court justice, everybody heard him say it. So he wasn't
yeah,
actually presenting a
but
different
that
message.
was, yeah, but that was appealing specifically to Black voters, to Black
Yes,
people.
but
It
my
was,
point is he didn't go to the brown people and say, "Hey, I'm going to, appoint a Latino or Latina." Everyone heard
yeah,
him appeal.
yeah.
So they knew what he
So
was doing is my point.
yeah,
The
they
brown
knew what he
people
was doing.
knew what he was promising.
The point is, the difference is the Republicans were not trying, or at least it didn't seem as if they were trying to appeal to any group. They just had their message, and whether you liked it
Right.
or not.
Right.
While
And
The
my
Democrats were
argument,
specifically
when I
Democrats
say
were specifically
homogeneity,
trying to appeal to different groups. Yeah.
is that better or worse?
Well, I don't know. It depends,
Okay, well,
right? So
seriously though, it's not a flippant question.
No, no. Okay, so let me try
Republican,
and
no, no,
answer.
no, no. Hold on one sec. Republicans don't have to. They don't. When I say homogeneity, I mean of
Hmm.
like not just racially, but I mean, philosophically, politically, philosophically.
Hmm.
They don't have to because there are a lot of things that say a black Republican would agree with a white Republican on. Okay, and let me give you a good example. If you've ever read, damn it, I can't think of his name right now. But if you go and you look at fascism, okay, or let's even say populism, that's an even better example. Okay, left populism um, is different because they see class as more of, a two-party thing where you
Important.
have working people and you have the bourgeoisie. On the right, their populism is the bourgeoisie, the working people, but they need a common enemy. Okay. And that's what MAGA did. Okay. You get black MAGA, you get other types of MAGA. It went beyond race. I do think the Republicans, MAGA in particular, do a better job of not racializing stuff. What they do need, though, is something that say, black MAGA and regular MAGA, white MAGA needs. Their common enemy was the people taking black jobs. Okay, they need an other. Republicans are way better at otherizing than Democrats are. So that's why you don't need to have like a tailored message to individual groups because they all hate the Latinos. The border was something I heard black MAGA and regular MAGA. It was all the border, the border, the border.
Yeah,
Democrats,
but
and I don't think one's better than the other. I think Democrats have a larger problem. There is no message that the left can give that will unify people enough that they don't need to individualize. They don't need to make a bunch of different promises to different groups. Um, I'm saying because they don't tend to demonize or otherize. Now, you may
but
agree,
they
you may
do.
not, but I think that's a solid argument.
But they do. If anything, during Trump's first presidency, we saw a lot of that authorizing, right? We saw a lot of that
On the left?
almost, you call, yes,
Okay, well, you
yes.
gotta you gotta help me out here because the only otherizing I saw was, hey, MAGA's evil.
That's authorizing as well.
Okay, well, you don't understand what I'm saying then, because it's not that's politics. That's left right. Okay, if the right otherizes the left otherizes the right. What I'm saying is when I go and I look at it, when I say black MAGA, how Trump got black people to convert to MAGA was blaming the south of the border people for taking black jobs. Okay, that wasn't a left right. That
Okay.
was literally
Yeah, yeah,
racial.
yeah. But what the Democrats were doing in effect was blaming black problems on white people in a
And
sense. So
okay, but that's not that.
both of
That's.
them were doing the
I'm
same
sorry.
thing.
Hey, Charles.
but,
I,
but
I I will have to tell you. Well, what I'm going to say is you don't quite get where I'm coming from.
no, I get where you're coming from. If you're saying if
Blaming black American
both
problems on white
both
Americans is
mm,
not the same thing as blaming something on people who aren't even American. The
I
other I'm
don't
talking about on the right, those weren't
mm.
Americans, they were illegals. Blacks
Yeah,
and
but it's
white. Oh,
irrelevant
listen to
because
what I'm saying. blacks and whites on the right came together over illegal immigration. They weren't this wasn't an American thing. This was illegals. These people aren't even American.
I
Why are they
understand
taking
that.
my job?
I understand that. But the
Okay,
point
that's
is,
not the same thing.
Stanley,
Is
the
okay.
point is,
No, Charles, you're not getting my point. Okay, you're trying.
Let me try and clarify my point. Let me try and clarify my point.
Here.
Let me clarify my point. My point is, both of them look for someone to blame, right?
So
whether it's literally the same thing. You're just blaming a different
okay,
group.
when I say otherizing, I'm not talking about Americans otherizing other Americans. Their commonality is they're Americans.
Yeah. Now my point is, it is irrelevant whether who they are blaming is American or not. The point is they are blaming other people or they are blaming another group.
Then
That's
you're not
something they
getting
have
my
in
point.
common.
You're literally not getting my point.
I'm getting your point. You're making the distinction
I don't think you are.
You are making the distinction that one is authorizing other Americans, right? One is blaming other Americans, while one is uniting Americans together to blame a group that is not even American. I am saying the point is both of them do blame. Blame is what they both have in common, right?
And I think I just simply think that what you're defining is you're basically saying blaming is blaming, and I don't agree with that.
I'm not saying blaming is blaming. I'm
Yeah,
saying
you are.
I'm saying blaming is the fundamental feature of what both of them they are doing.
Right.
They could literally switch the groups.
You're literally saying blame is blame. Fundamentally, blaming is what both sides are doing.
Yeah,
And
both
what I'm
sides
saying is
blaming.
what I'm saying is the difference between left blaming and right blaming is who you blame.
I don't disagree, but
well, then I don't need to go farther than that. That is why I'm literally saying there are different types of blame, and the typing is done by who you blame.
So why is one better than the other? Why is one sort of blaming better than the other?
I'm not saying one is better. I'm just saying they're different.
Of course, they're different.
Well, then that's all I'm saying. If you get that, then you get my point.
So what's the point? What's the point you're trying to drive?
My point is that Democrats blaming Republicans or Republicans blaming Democrats has been done forever. What the right does, the reason the right tends to be, and maybe I should have said intellectually homogenous rather than racially homogenous. Blacks and whites on the right are intellectually homogenous because they will blame America's problems on illegal immigration. Okay, the Democrats, the left, will blame America's problems not on immigrants. They will blame it on Republicans or some of the ideology that the Republicans think. Okay, you don't hear Democrats demonizing immigrants. Not much. Not to the degree Republicans do.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we disagree on that. I was just saying that both of them are essentially playing the same game.
And I'm saying they're not. You basically want to say it is a blame game. I'm saying the difference in the game is who they blame. Democrats blame Republicans and their bad ideas.
It's still a blame game.
Republicans will blame Democrats, but they will also blame immigrants.
Blame. So
okay, then maybe you and I have maybe. Hey, I think we're just not going to understand. We have a difference on what blame is. Blaming is not blaming. Who you blame makes the difference.
I'm not disagreeing on that point, but I'm
Okay, well
saying
then
that
I can't help you farther than that. I basically say left blaming and right blaming are not the same because they don't blame the same, evil.
yeah, I
Okay,
agree.
I think it's different.
I agree. But
And
by the end of the
therefore left blaming and right blaming are not equal, they're just different.
Okay, so let's talk about the ways in which the right does identity politics. Because I have seen with the rise of MAGA now and how emboldened they've become, I've seen them taking on the elements of the extreme left that they criticize. Being very cultish, being very uncritical,
Well,
being
it's not the
very
extreme left only that does it. The left in general thinks MAGA's a cult, even the centrists.
No, I'm not saying what the left thinks. I'm saying what the right criticize the extreme left of being thin-skinned, of being very cultish, of being uncritical, of being, it's either this way or the highway, right? I'm seeing a whole lot of that with MAGA
Well,
right
the
now.
right tends to be wrong on that case. Number one, and I've actually fussed with people. Um, MAGA thinks if you're left of center, like if you are not MAGA, if you are even one whisker hair over on the left side, you're all extreme. So when you say extreme left, if you were a MAGA Republican, that would mean me, that would mean Biden, that would mean anyone who's on the left. And I know this from experience. I'm not even, floating this is a posit. This is what I experience. Someone like Trump thinks, but how many times have you heard MAGA, Trump in particular, talk about Biden being an extremist? They think everyone on the left. They don't distinguish between progressives, say, and centrists in the Democratic Party. They think we're all the same.
Yeah,
We're
but
all extreme.
that's exactly what the left thought about the right in Trump's four
I don't
years.
agree with that. And I could
But
be
that's what I
biased, but
saw.
no,
But
I
that's what I
no.
saw.
Okay, let me put it to you this way. I see more of American politics than you do. I mean, I literally see it daily. So I tend to look at American politics. If America really had courage, we would split into four different parties. There'd be left progressives, there would be centrist Democrats, there would be MAGA, and there would be, what MAGA calls establishment Republicans. Okay, there are people like, say, I'm trying to think of a good example. David Brooks, for instance, he
Mhm.
is center right, but he separates himself from MAGA. As a
Yeah, but
matter of fact,
there's so few of them that it's almost irrelevant.
I
I mean,
disagree that there's few of them.
where are they? They're not saying anything. They're not
If
challenging Trump.
read the New York Times, read, they're
Are
they're
they in
not
power? Are they
enough.
in
They're
politics?
not
Where
enough.
are they? Are they in the
They're
House? Are they in the
literally
Senate?
writing, Charles. They literally write every day. You just need to go to the new. Do you subscribe to the New York Times?
No, I don't. My
Okay, well, you
point
might
is,
want to subscribe or do some reading of American publications. They're all over the place.
yeah. So my point is, when you look at the traditional structures of power, right,
Okay,
and politics.
define traditional structures of power.
Okay, so look at the House, look at the Senate, look at the governors, Republican governors, the Republican Party itself. All the establishments seem to be either aligned with Trump or they're silent. I mean, with all the things that Trump is doing currently, all the unconstitutional things he's doing, right? There've been no break in the rank. The majority of them have been with him. So that's what I'm saying. Where are they? Where are these Republicans who are challenging Trump? Who are the quote unquote the moderates
Okay,
in power?
well, I think if you go looking in the Senate, you will find them way more so than in the House. And when you say structures of power, there are layers. Okay, the Republican governors run their states. They don't have a lot to do with the federal government. They govern states. They're believe it or not, there are plenty of overlap and stuff, but Republican governors don't have national power at all, other than maybe times of emergency. But Republican governors mean nothing to say what Trump, uh, not directly in the day to day operation of the federal government. They're literally there's state government, there's national government. That's what federalism is. So when you say traditional powers, traditional structures of power, it is extremely nuanced. Um, when they say 50, the 50 states are 50 laboratories of democracy, day to day, a governor, you know, absent, say, a national emergency or needing to appeal to the federal government for grants for education and stuff like that, you can probably go 6 weeks and not care about what the president is doing, depending on the state. The bigger states like California, New York, they will care. If you're a Republican state like Montana or Dakota, they don't care day to day what the federal government is doing. So that traditional structures of power thing, that's kind of so nuanced. You would almost have to talk about a specific issue for me to kind of figure out what that means.
Okay. So, lastly, the point I want us to address is: should Democrats should they ditch identity politics? No, we've been talking about can they. Now the question is, should they?
I don't even know that it comes down to should they. They're not going to be able to. American politics, literally the bedrock of American politics is identity. And when I say identity, are you a Democrat or are you a Republican? That is an identity. Okay, now if you want to be more specific about the racial politics of it, because race is one type of identity, who you vote for is another identity, male and female is a type of identity, young and old are an identity. Identity politics is literally in the DNA of human beings. Okay, go back and you think about Linnaeus. How they started coming up with species. How they used to. You're familiar. You're pretty much real familiar with biology. We have an animal kingdom where we classify plants into phyla and all that stuff. Humans literally are identity politics machines. Okay, knowing friend or foe, that's an identity. So if you want to talk racial identity, which is what they mean when they say identity politics, throw out that term, they really mean race. No, I don't think Democrats can do that because, believe it or not, within the Democratic Party, blacks tend to be the most conservative voting bloc, and without blacks, Democrats would never win anything.
Yeah,
So no, they're not going to be able to abandon it.
But they lost. Despite this strategy, they lost. So,
but you know what? I disagree that they lost because of identity politics. I think you're wrong there. I think Thomas Chatterton Williams on that. Why the Democrats lost? It wasn't identity politics that caused them to lose. Okay, I don't even know where Chatterton Williams gets that notion from. Thomas Chatterton Williams is not good at politics.
So you're saying, okay, so what do the Democrats need to do differently to win in, say, 2028?
Well, funny you should say that. And I've said this. I'm surprised I haven't said it to you. I think the two main reasons is because they got immigration wrong. They did not take it seriously enough. Number two, I would almost be willing to blame the entire thing on Biden. And the reason I say that is, I was kind of, part of that crowd. Well, every time I see Biden, he's okay. I didn't actually realize how bad off he was until that first debate last June. Okay, when he got out debating Trump, and they were the ones, Democrats and Biden specifically, were the ones who were hot for that debate. You could just tell the dude was not up to the job. And the problem is that if you remember at the very beginning back in 2020, it's kind of floating in the air that Biden would be kind of like a transitional president. He would be a one and done. They just wanted to get things back to normal. And Biden, like every leader, started to think that, oh, hey, if I'm not president, things are just going to fall apart. It was Biden and his health, and it was them not taking immigration seriously. I knew things were a problem when Abbott of Texas, the governor of Texas, sent that busload of people, I think it was to New York. And I knew things were definitely going wrong when that load of Texas immigrants, DeSantis in Florida, went and said, hey, Abbott, I'll help you out. Send them to Florida, or Florida will send a plane over, and we're going to clown the liberals, the Democrats in general. We're going to fly a load of them up to Martha's Vineyard. Democrats should, Democrats should have reacted immediately. When the Democrats started getting clowned on immigration, hey, you know what? Texas is tired of it. We're just going to send a bunch of them to Martha's Vineyard, which is, considered kind of like a liberal strong, like the elite liberal stronghold. The Obamas have a house there, by the way. Send them to New York. Send them to all these sanctuary cities. Democrats should have just reacted in a very decisive way. Abbott wanting to federalize the National Guard to go down to the border, Abbott putting concertina wire, barbed wire, there was like an immigrant swimming across the Rio Grande, got caught in that concertina wire and drowned because, the immigrant couldn't free himself. Immigration and Biden's health are the two reasons Democrats lost. It was not because of identity politics.
What could Democrats have done better in terms of immigration?
What they could have done, I just described it. Somebody should have been able to convince him that, dude, you need to just say, hey, I can't do another term. One of the criticisms of
I mean on immigration specifically.
I literally told you.
That's what Republicans did.
I literally just told you.
You explained what Republicans did.
They should have reacted strongly. You want to know what strong action they should have taken?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Well, when for instance, when Governor Abbott of Texas wanted to federalize his National Guard. Now, I say federalize, I really don't mean federalize. He basically said, because governors control the National Guard in their state, they're basically commanders in chief. He said, hey, look, I'm commander in chief, Texas National Guard, y'all go down to the border and prevent immigrants from coming across the Rio Grande. Had I been Biden, I'm like, dude, you know what? Let me send the 82nd Airborne, or let me help you, because immigration is a federal issue, but it gets kind of weird because we have governors of border states. If I'd been Biden, I would have said, you know what? How much National Guard? That's not enough. How much do you need? Who do you need? Do you need that? Do you need the Rangers down there? Do you need the SEALs down there?
Yeah.
That's the sort of thing he should have been doing. Republican governor who wants to blame Democrats for everything. Well, let me not give you a reason to blame Democrats or call us soft on immigration. Here's a couple battalions. What else do you need? Nukes? He should have called. If it had been me, I would have literally recalled troops from Afghanistan to go down there. Now, how are Democrats soft? But the other, don't give them the impetus. Don't let them call you soft.
So
Give them what
think,
they need. Give them more
yeah,
than they need.
Yeah, I was really baffled at the Democrats' strategy on immigration. It didn't make any sense. I mean,
well,
I'm
gonna say
did not make any sense.
I'm gonna say
it's almost like they wanted the illegals to come in, like they were actively
I don't agree
encouraging
with
them
that.
to. Yeah, you may not agree with that, but that's the way it seemed to me. Them not wanting to do anything about it. It seemed like they wanted it to happen that way. And it was
Not
becoming
how
a
it
big
was.
issue. It was becoming a big issue, and they refused to do anything about it. So it just
Okay,
seemed
well,
like
let
they
me
wanted.
tell you the actual reality. I think they were kind of slow to react. And I do think that there's a big Hispanic component to the Democratic Party. So Democrats might have been more sensitive to it. But I don't know if you recall the whole Haitians in Ohio thing. Remember when Trump started in, oh, the Haitians are eating pets and all that? Well, guess who brought the Haitians into Springfield, Ohio? It wasn't Democrats. That's the part that Trump kind of was able to avoid. Jim DeWine, I think it's Jim DeWine, Governor DeWine of Ohio, a Republican, literally brought those Haitians there because Toyota wanted to build a factory and there weren't enough people in the area to kind of work the factory. So Governor DeWine, who has a charity like a school and kind of like a charitable organization, a Republican, brought those Haitians and encouraged Haitians from other parts of the United States to come there. And then all of a sudden it blew up. And all of a sudden it's Democrats and immigration. It was a Republican governor who brought those immigrants there.
Yeah, I mean, it's like
And
Trump.
all that Trump. Look,
It's
the immigration problem actually was started by Republicans. Reagan did amnesty back in the 80s. That's where it now again, I don't know much about immigration before then, and I'm not that, I'm not familiar with the history. I was old enough because I was in high school I remember Reagan just said, hey, if you're here and you're illegal, you're now legal. That was the amnesty. Okay. That might have been the start of it all. But the other thing people don't seem to realize is the Chamber of Commerce, small business owner types of Republicans loved illegal immigration because they could pay these people half or whatever the number was that they had to pay. They didn't have to pay minimum wage, to some illegal Mexican. They'd pay them under the table, keep it off the books, or they would pay them way less than they would have to pay an American because you have to pay Americans a minimum wage. So it's the people. How many Republicans would, cause a scandal because their gardener was illegal or their maid was illegal? It was Republicans. Republicans had their thumb in that illegal immigration pie. And better than that, I forget the exact name of it, but there is a system for that if you're going to hire immigrants, they have to pass a background check. You have to make sure they have a green card, that they're here legally. Republicans, the Chamber of Commerce type Republican, the small business, you know what the Chamber of Commerce is, right?
No, not really.
Okay, well, every Chamber of Commerce are like a network across America. It's very localized, but they are the small business advocates. And they tend to be very Republican. You'll have, and look it up, Google Chamber of Commerce in America, and you'll kind of get my drift. But these small business owners, hey, if I can cut a corner and cut my overhead and hire some illegals for my lawn care company, and I pay them under the table, they're kind of like hostages. It's like, hey, if you do something I don't like, I'm going to report you to immigration. I will pay you $2 an hour and you will like it, or you can go home, or I can just, pick up the phone and have you deported. You need to do. My point is that these small business Chamber of Commerce Republicans encouraged illegal immigrants to come over for decades. Okay, it became a problem. I would say probably, I would say after 9/11, because it's like, oh my goodness, we're letting terrorists come across the southern border. Immigration really started to blow up as an issue after 9/11. And you know what? That sort of thing plays into the xenophobic type of American. Hey, you will hear, oh, these Asians coming over here, the H-1B people. The H-1B visa people have nothing to do with illegal immigration. That visa means they're here legally. But all of a sudden, you hear the Steve Bannon types talking about, well, having all these people here, legal or illegal, they're changing American culture. And when they say American culture, they mean white culture. Okay, this browning of America thing, like by 2030 or 2040, there are going to be more minorities collectively than the population of, quote, white people. So if all these minorities get together, they'll outnumber the white people. That's been a big thing. That's been brewing in America for decades. This browning of America. Have you heard that term?
Yeah, I have.
The Steve Bannon folks have been fearing that forever. So that's part of the impetus to get these brown people, these non-Americans, these illegals. They're killing two birds with one stone. The genuine problem of having a bunch of illegals here, who a portion of them are committing crime. Yeah, we need to get those people out of here. That is true. Okay, but the other part of it, you heard Elon versus Steve Bannon over the H-1B visa stuff. We want that. We don't want even the legal immigrants here. Okay, Trump has been deporting people who, in my opinion, and there are many who would argue me, into the ground over this. They're looking for reasons to send people who are here legally home. I mean, I don't know if you've been keeping up with it, but they're literally snatching people. I'll give you a good example. This lady, I can't remember, she was at Tufts University, PhD candidate from Saudi Arabia. She wrote an editorial in a student newspaper basically saying, hey, the Palestinians, are being mistreated in Gaza, etc. ICE literally came up to this young lady. She was going to lunch or something. About 6 of them came up, some of them in masks, just out of the blue. They just said, hey, we're here to put you in detention. We're going to deport you, out of the blue. All she did. Immigrants have a lot of the same constitutional rights as Americans do. Free speech is one of them. As long as you're not, harming people, writing an editorial, expressing your opinion, immigrants can do that. Well, Trump says no. If you're supporting the Palestinians and you are on a student visa or something like that, hey, you're being anti Semitic, we're going to get you out of here. It's literally trumped up charges. So, my point is that the xenophobes are going to get something they want. Therefore, we will support Trump because dude, I don't know how many black people in that John Galt space, they want anyone who is not like supporting American values, meaning they're not willing to assimilate. If you're a student and you say something that pisses off the president or you piss off the right, you're out of here. Whether you're got an H-1B visa, student visa, hey, we don't like what you said. If you come to America, you better be 100% for America and quote grateful. Did you see the Zelensky thing? You need to be grateful that we're even helping you out. Why are you here without a tie? We don't like your demeanor. Why aren't you being more deferential to President Trump? If you're not, dude, there are black people who are on the right who think that, hey, black people, hey, you'd still be a slave if it weren't for Thomas Jefferson or white people in America who brought you over. They did you a favor by bringing you over to be a slave. There are people who think that on the right. So when I say black MAGA specifically, but there are other like non-MAGA people probably who think that the homogeneity, the worship of white American culture, they all think that, hey, Jose needs to go. If, Ahmed is leading a student protest at Columbia University, well, that's not being grateful. Your butt is here studying at an American university. You need to go. You're not upholding, what we think are American values. So the homogeneity on the right supersedes race identity politics. It's American identity politics. It's us versus them immigrants, whether they're here legally or not. If you're not waving a flag and thanking President Trump for being here, you're out of here.
Yeah. So I think this would be a very good place to draw this stream to a close. Yeah, I get some points. I agree with some of the points you've made. I disagree with some of the points you've made. But
let me put it to you this way.
We'll leave it at
I
that.
don't think I'm wrong. You know me. I don't tend to,
nobody ever thinks
say
they're
stuff
wrong.
I can't support.
Nobody ever thinks they're wrong. Of course, you
Oh,
think
no.
you're right.
The thing is I can support it.
No, it's irrelevant whether you can support it. Everybody thinks that they're right.
Okay, but some people, and you and I have talked about this before. Some people know more about America than others.
Mm-hmm.
I literally live here. I grew up here. I literally am knee deep in, reading about American politics. Dude, well, let me ask you a blunt question. Do you think you have a better idea of what's going on in America than I do?
It's an irrelevant question. I'm not.
Oh, it's very relevant.
I know. It's not a debate on who knows more about American culture. It's about certain issues. Whatever position I'm taking.
Oh, no. See, that's where you and I will always disagree. I'm gonna be very blunt, and maybe I'll sound arrogant. I know miles more about American politics than you do. I know miles more of American culture than you do. I've said it before. Sometimes, I understand you may have opinions, but literally, I swim in these American waters for 60 years.
Okay.
I know it.
Okay.
Now, I'm not saying there are plenty of Americans who know it better than I do, but in these YouTube streets, I kind of know what I'm talking about.
I
You
defer
don't
to your,
you don't
I
have to
defer to your
agree.
superior. I defer to your superior knowledge, Stanley. Anyway, thank you so much for
Yes,
coming
sir.
to the show tonight. We're going to be back by next week, Thursday, talk about something else. So
Well,
like,
I'll come up with something we can be more agree on.
no, we don't have to agree as long as it's interesting. I'm not into the business of agreement. We agree, we don't agree. Let's discuss the issues, right? That's what I'm
Right.
I'm here for. So thanks, Stanley, for
Yes,
coming.
sir. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, like, share, subscribe, and we'll catch you guys next week, Thursday. It's bye for
All
now.
right. Take it
Yeah,
easy.
you too. Bye.